The forest had never heard a cry like hers. It wasn't a growl, or a roar, or the deep rumble of a predator. It was something far more haunting, a low broken sound that echoed off the trees and drifted with the wind like a song of sorrow. Somewhere deep within Alder Valley, a mother bear stood trembling beside a river that had betrayed her. The storm had been brutal. Rain lashed the earth like punishment. The river swelled beyond its banks, drowning everything in its path, including the fragile den she had carefully carved weeks ago. She had fought to reach her cubs, tearing through mud and debris, but it was too late. 2 were gone, swept away. The third, she carried in her mouth for miles before it went still. She didn't eat. Didn't rest. She just wandered, mourning. Days passed. Then weeks. And then, something changed. Near the edge of a sleepy village, abandoned in an old barn, 4 tiny puppies whimpered in a crate. Their mother had died in an accident. They were alone. Doomed. Until she appeared. A wild bear. Ragged. Grieving. Hollow-eyed. And yet, she didn't harm them. She lay beside them. She let them crawl against her chest. She fed them. What happened next would stun scientists, soften skeptics, and capture the hearts of millions across the world. Because what unfolded in that forgotten barn wasn't just a twist of fate. It was a story about loss. About healing. About the kind of love that doesn't need to match species, just souls. The sky had been wrong all day. The air was heavy with a stillness that clung to the trees like a warning. In Alder Valley, where the forest rose high and thick above the winding river, the animals moved differently. Squirrels abandoned their branches early, birds flew low in silence, and even the deer, always graceful, skittered with nervous steps. But the bear didn't move. She lay curled in the soft earth of her den, a hollow she had dug months ago into the hillside near the riverbank. It had taken her days to find the right spot, away from the human trails, tucked beneath mossy roots, close to water but safe from predators. She had lined it with pine needles, dried grass, and fur pulled from her own body. Inside the den, 3 newborn cubs squeaked blindly, their tiny bodies pressing against her warmth. They were only 12 days old, helpless, blind, barely able to lift their heads. But they were hers. And that meant everything. The storm came without mercy. By nightfall, the sky turned to fire. Lightning split the air into jagged scars. Thunder cracked so loud the trees seemed to shudder. Then the rain came, not gentle drops, but sheets that turned dirt to rivers and rivers to monsters. The river beside her den rose faster than she could have imagined. At first, she didn't panic. She'd survived floods before. But this one was different. The ground above began to shift. Roots groaned. The entrance to the den filled with water and mud. Her cubs squealed. She blocked the entrance with her body, pushing back against the weight of the earth, trying to keep the water from reaching them. But the pressure grew too strong. With a deafening crack, the hillside collapsed. She fought her way out, thrashing through mud and branches, her claws scraping against roots, her lungs filling with panic. It took all the strength she had to claw upward toward light. By the time she emerged, 2 of her cubs were gone. Swept away. The third, the smallest, the one she called to first every morning with her softest huff, lay motionless near the edge of a broken log. She nudged it with her nose. Once. Twice. It stirred, just a little, and she lifted it in her jaws and ran. She ran like something was chasing her. Like the sky itself had turned against her. Her feet pounded across cold rocks, her fur dripping with mud and blood. She climbed away from the floodplain into the higher pines, where the trees whispered in the wind and the air tasted of pine and morning. She placed the tiny cub in a soft patch of moss and lay beside it. 4 hours. Whining softly. Licking it. Trying to share her warmth. But it was already too cold. The moment came quietly, just a final, slow exhale. The cub stopped twitching. Its little paws went still. And in that moment, something in the bear's chest tore open. She stayed with the body all night. The rain stopped just before dawn, leaving a fog that curled through the trees like ghosts. By morning, she rose. Not in rage. Not in fear. But in something worse, emptiness. She gently lifted the cub's body and carried it to a patch of earth beneath a leaning tree. There, with trembling claws, she dug. Not deep, just enough to hide what remained. When she was done, she sat beside the mound. She didn't howl. She didn't roar. She just sat. As the sun broke through the clouds and cast its golden fingers on the forest floor, she bowed her head for the last time. The days that followed blurred together. She wandered without purpose. No den. No destination. Her hunger gnawed at her, but she ignored it. She followed the scent trails along the riverside, hoping, praying, for some trace of her lost cubs. But there was nothing. Only silence. Only shadows. Until something changed. A faint, unfamiliar sound, high-pitched, helpless, soft. Like crying. Not bear cubs. Something else. And for the first time since the storm, her ears twitched forward. The bear moved cautiously through the woods, following the strange thin sound that echoed like a whisper on the wind. It was not the voice of danger. It was not the bark of a dog or the cry of a fox. It was something softer, too soft for a predator. A whimper. A squeak. The sound of something small. Something helpless. Something alone. And it pulled her like a memory. She stepped through a tangle of cedar roots and paused at the edge of the forest. Ahead, a fence made of old wooden slats wrapped around a clearing. Inside was a large red barn, a field with rusted farm tools, and beyond that, the faint outlines of a small cottage. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney. This was not the wild. This was the edge of the human world. She should have turned back. But the sound came again, clearer now. She followed it. One careful step after another, her massive paws landing with surprising quiet, the bear approached the barn. The door was slightly ajar. A draft of warm air carried the scent of hay, and milk, and something new. She nudged the door with her snout. It creaked open. Inside, light filtered through cracks in the boards. Dust danced in golden shafts. And tucked beneath a low shelf of tools was an old wooden crate. Inside it, 4 tiny creatures. The puppies were no more than a week old. Their fur was patchy, their bodies small and round. They squirmed blindly in the straw, bumping against each other. One let out a high-pitched whimper. Another yawned. They were alone. Their mother, a village stray known as Molly, had died just days earlier. She'd been hit by a delivery truck. The farmer had placed her pups in the barn, hoping to take them to the shelter once the weather cleared. But now, they were not alone. The bear stepped closer. She sniffed the crate. One of the puppies raised its head and let out a trembling squeal. Something inside the bear's chest shifted. It was a sound she hadn't heard in weeks, a sound she thought she'd never hear again. She pressed her snout against the crate. The puppies didn't recoil. One of them crawled clumsily toward the warmth of her breath and nuzzled against her. And then, slowly, the bear did something unimaginable. She lay down. Not beside the crate. Around it. She wrapped her body around the box, curling like a great wall of fur and breath and sorrow, and warmth. That night, the barn sat silent beneath the moonlight. The farmer's dog, old and half-blind, barked once, then fell quiet. The bear didn't sleep much. She kept her eyes half-closed, her ears twitching at every sound. She could feel the puppies shifting in the crate beside her belly, their bodies pushing against the slats, seeking warmth, comfort, life. And she gave it. When one cried, she leaned down and gently nudged it with her nose. When another kicked its tiny leg, she pulled the crate closer with a careful paw. At one point, one of the puppies, the smallest, climbed over the edge of the crate and nestled itself directly into the curve of her arm. She didn't move. She barely breathed. She let it sleep there until morning. The next morning, the sun rose over Alder Valley like a secret about to be told. Birdsong returned to the trees. The river, finally calm, glistened with guilt. And the farmer, a man named Harold Becker, known more for his turnips than his temperament, walked across the field toward the barn with a mug of strong tea in his hand. He hadn't heard any noise the night before, which was strange. His old dog Max barked at squirrels, rabbits, even shadows. But last night? Silence. As he reached the barn, he paused. Something felt off. The door, which he was sure he'd latched, was open. A cold shiver crept down his spine. He set the mug down and approached carefully. Peeking through the doorway, he stopped cold. There was a bear. Lying in the hay. Huge. Still. Silent. And curled in the crook of its body, the crate of puppies. At first, He thought he was hallucinating. He backed away slowly, heart thudding. 1,000 thoughts flashed through his mind. Grab the shotgun? Call the sheriff? Get help? But then he heard it. Not growling. Not roaring. Just a soft, rhythmic breathing, like a giant heartbeat. The bear was sleeping. And the puppies? They were nuzzled into her side. Harold stood frozen for what felt like hours. He watched as the bear opened one lazy eye, looked at him, and blinked. Not a threat. Not a warning. Just acknowledgement. And then, she laid her head back down. Harold took a shaky breath. And for the first time in his 71 years of life, he whispered to himself, "That's not just a bear, that's a mother." Harold Becker had lived a quiet life. He wasn't a man of emotion. His days were measured in chores and weather forecasts. But what he saw in that barn, a wild bear guarding 4 helpless puppies like they were her own, had shaken him. He didn't go back inside the barn that morning. He couldn't. Instead, he sat on an overturned wheelbarrow nearby, staring at the door, sipping his lukewarm tea in silence, trying to convince himself that he hadn't gone mad. Every so often, he'd hear a faint whimper from the puppies, and nothing else. No snarls. No tearing. No screams. Just peace. And that's when he made the first of many unexpected decisions. He didn't call the sheriff. He didn't load his shotgun. He called Leah Mendez, the regional wildlife officer. "Harold," she said sleepily over the line, "what's this about a bear in your barn?" "You're gonna want to see it yourself," he muttered. "And bring your camera." Leah Mendez was no stranger to unusual calls. Over her 5 years patrolling the Alder Valley district, she'd relocated raccoons, wrestled foxes from chicken coops, and even once tranquilized a mountain lion that wandered into a birthday party. But nothing prepared her for what she saw that morning. She crouched low behind a row of hay bales and peeked through the barn's slatted wall. There, just as Harold had described, lay a wild brown bear, wrapped gently around a wooden crate. 4 tiny puppies lay in the hay, each nestled near her chest. One had clearly been licking her paw. Another was suckling from a bottle Harold had left in the barn the day before, now pulled into the hay and guarded like treasure. "She's nursing them?" Leah whispered. "No," Harold replied, shaking his head. "But she's keeping them alive. She hasn't hurt a single one." Leah lifted her camera. "This is going to break the internet." Leah took a few careful photos, long lens only, and posted one to her department's wildlife update page with a simple caption. "Wild brown bear discovered sheltering abandoned puppies in a village barn. No aggression. Observing for now. More updates soon. #BearMom #Alder Valley Miracle." She expected a few shares. She got 12,000 in the first 2 hours. By sunset, it was trending across 3 countries. Animal rescue organizations reached out. News outlets requested interviews. Wildlife conservationists debated ethical response plans. Everyone had an opinion, but none had seen what Leah and Harold had. A broken-hearted mother, who had chosen love instead of grief. At first, the villagers panicked. "A bear? In town? Put it down," one man shouted at the town meeting. "What if it turns?" "She's not aggressive," Leah calmly repeated. "She had plenty of chances to harm those pups, and she didn't." "She's still a wild animal," someone argued. "We have kids here." But others, especially the elders, began to speak up. "She lost her cubs," said Mrs. Kinney, the 82-year-old baker who had lived in Alder Valley her entire life. "And those pups lost their mother. Maybe they saved each other." It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a mirror, and everyone saw something different. Fear, wonder, grief, hope. For the next several days, Leah and Harold monitored the barn. They kept their distance, using trail cams and binoculars. The bear rarely left. Only once or twice at night did she disappear, returning quietly before dawn with muddy fur and a calmer breath. She never hunted livestock. She never growled at humans. She was present, protective, gentle. Harold started bringing her fresh water and dog formula. He left it in a metal bowl 10 feet from the barn. The bear would wait until he walked away, then lumber out slowly, drink, and return to the crate. Once, Leah caught her on camera licking one of the puppies clean, like a real mother would. By the end of the week, the story had reached every corner of the internet. Mother Nature's heartbreak and hope. Bear adopts orphan puppies after losing her own cubs. Barn of miracles. What this bear did will melt you. The hashtags #BearMom and #WildLove trended for days. Artists painted her. Children sent letters addressed to the bear who loves puppies. Wildlife lovers donated to local rescue shelters. One foundation even offered to install a permanent camera outside the barn, which Harold firmly declined. "This isn't a zoo," he told them. "It's a moment. And I won't let it be ruined." Leah smiled at that, because she knew what he meant. By the 10th day, the town had become two towns. One side stood with Leah and Harold, believing this was something rare, a natural miracle, a lesson in empathy from the most unexpected source. The other side, led by anxious parents and business owners, feared the wildness behind the tenderness. "Today she mothers," they said. "Tomorrow she mauls." The local news stations didn't help either. Reporters flocked to the edge of Alder Valley, asking questions like, "Can a wild bear ever be trusted? What if she's just waiting for the pups to fatten up? Are humans romanticizing nature too much?" Leah was pulled into calls with state officials and wildlife ethics boards. They wanted answers, and fast. "You're telling us the bear voluntarily entered a human structure, didn't attack, and is cohabiting with domestic animals?" one official asked. "Yes," Leah replied. "And you've let her stay?" "She's doing a better job than most people would," Leah whispered. The silence on the line was deafening. 2 days later, the decision came down. Remove the puppies. Relocate the bear. Do it peacefully if you can. But do it now. Leah stood beside Harold outside the barn, staring at the printed email in her hands. "She'll leave if we take them," Harold said quietly. "She'll know." Leah nodded. "And she might not survive the relocation." "She's barely eating," he added. "Her will to live is tied to those pups now. You can see it in her eyes." But orders were orders. Leah agreed to wait until sundown, one last night. If she leaves voluntarily again, maybe it's a sign. They placed fresh food outside the barn, locked the puppies inside their crate for safety, and sat back with binoculars. Dusk turned to night. And sure enough, just after midnight, the bear rose. She licked each puppy once, stood tall, and walked out the barn door into the moonlight. Leah held her breath. The bear paused at the edge of the woods. And looked back. In that moment, brief and silent, it felt like the world paused with her. The bear's eyes shimmered in the moonlight. She was only a shadow now, a silhouette of grief and instinct and grace. Then she did something that stunned them both. She let out a low moan. Not a roar. Not a warning. It sounded like a goodbye. She turned and vanished into the trees. Leah didn't move for a full minute. Then, slowly, she entered the barn. The puppies whimpered and turned their heads toward her, confused but unharmed. She sat down beside them and cried. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I know she didn't want this either." The puppies were relocated to a small animal foster center just outside the valley. Volunteers took shifts bottle feeding them, playing soft bear sounds to comfort them at night, and keeping them together in the same pen. They weren't normal pups anymore. They didn't whine when held. They didn't bark much either. But they curled into each other at night, just like they used to under thick fur and a heartbeat bigger than theirs. Harold visited every few days, bringing hay from the barn to place in their bedding. Leah, meanwhile, led a quiet search for signs of the bear. She found none. No paw prints. No scat. No broken branches. "It's like she vanished with the fog," one ranger said. The story faded from headlines over the next month. Newer, louder things took over the internet. But in Alder Valley, the memory didn't disappear. The barn remained closed. Harold carved a wooden bear statue and placed it near the entrance with a plaque. She came to mourn. She stayed to love. Leah kept one photo in her office, a black and white shot of the bear curled around the crate, eyes half closed, one pup asleep across her paw. People came to her office for advice. But they always left asking about that photo. And she always smiled and said, "It was the quietest miracle I've ever seen." It had been 43 days since the bear vanished. The valley had returned to routine. The news crews left. Harold reopened part of the barn, though he kept the crate in the same place, untouched. The puppies, now thriving under care, were just beginning to eat on their own and recognize human voices. Leah spent her mornings checking the northern ridge. She told herself it was for her reports, but deep down she was looking. Hoping. The cameras set up in the barn had long since stopped recording. The team had removed them out of respect. But the memory lingered like a warm echo, of fur paws, and the impossible bond that had stunned the world. Then one foggy morning, Harold's dog began barking again, and wouldn't stop. Harold stepped out with a cup of coffee, bleary-eyed and barefoot on the porch. Max. Stop that noise, or he froze. There, just 10 feet from his front fence, were tracks. Fresh tracks. Huge, unmistakable, paw-shaped depressions in the soft dirt. They circled the barn. Back and forth. Back and forth. And then, they led to the cottage. Harold's eyes widened. He followed the trail with trembling steps. When he reached his porch, he saw it. One of the old dog blankets, the one he'd thrown out by the woodshed, had been dragged back. Folded. Laid neatly near the steps. And on top of it, a wildflower. A single violet. When Leah arrived an hour later, she barely believed it herself. She came back, Harold said. Leah studied the prints. She must have come down during the night. Alone. Quiet. Looking for them, he asked. Leah hesitated. Or maybe just checking in. Making sure they're okay. That thought sat heavy between them. They followed the tracks back into the woods, stopping only when the trail disappeared beneath a thicket of brambles. But even there, Leah noticed something else, a clearing. Fresh bedding. Claw marks on tree trunks. Pine cones neatly stacked in a corner. She's staying close, Leah whispered. Why? Harold asked. Because a real mother never leaves completely. Back at the shelter, something strange began to happen. The puppies, now 2 months old, became restless at night. Not crying. Not whining. Just alert. They'd sniff the air. Stand by the window. One even pawed at the glass one evening, looking into the darkness with soft eyes and a tilted head. As if remembering something. As if waiting. The staff didn't connect the dots at first. But Leah knew. So she asked for something radical. Let's bring the puppies back to the barn. For one night. The shelter director balked. You want to reunite them with a bear? I don't think she wants them back, Leah replied softly. I think she just wants to know they're okay. That evening, under the soft orange sky, Leah and Harold placed the puppies, birch, maple, clover, and thistle, inside the old crate. The same crate. In the same spot. They left the door slightly open. Turned off all lights. And retreated to the woods with binoculars. Silence. Then wind. Then movement. A shape emerged from the trees. Massive. Slow. Familiar. She returned. She didn't rush. She didn't sniff for danger. She simply walked to the barn, stopped at the threshold, and looked inside. The puppies turned. Their ears perked. No barking. No fear. Just silence. Recognition. One puppy, the smallest, Thistle, wagged her tail. The bear stepped forward. And then, without entering, she sat. Just inside the door. Breathing slowly. Watching. The bear stayed for hours. She didn't move much. Just kept her eyes on the pups. Once, one of them climbed out and waddled toward her. She didn't touch it. But she lowered her head to the straw. And the pup curled up beside her snout. The others followed. Soon, all 4 were asleep. Touching the one being they couldn't forget. The camera captured it all, but Leah didn't share the footage. Some stories are not for views. They're for the soul. Morning crept softly over Alder Valley, brushing the treetops in hues of orange and gold. In the barn, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the old wood slats, catching bits of dust as they danced over fur and straw. For puppies stirred slowly, yawning and stretching. The bear was gone. She had left quietly, sometime before dawn, just as she had arrived. There were no signs of panic. No rushed exit. just large paw prints leading back into the forest. As if she had completed something, and knew it was time. The smallest puppy, Thistle, sat beside the open barn door for a long time. Her ears perked at every breeze. But the massive shadow did not return. And it never did. The puppies grew fast. Within weeks, they were adopted into nearby homes by families who had followed the story closely and agreed to keep the siblings connected. Leah personally arranged the adoptions. Her only rule: the pups must remain in touch, not just with each other, but with the barn. With the place that had given them their second mother. They each kept something from her. A birch had the crate's original wooden tag, now chewed but sacred. Maple kept a bit of the fur that had been caught in the crate's edge. A clover always circled 3 times before sleeping, just like she used to in the bear's arms. Thistle, she never barked. Only made a soft, rumbling huff when happy, like a cub pretending to be something bigger. And all of them, no matter where they were taken, responded to the same thing. A low guttural moan, the sound the bear had made that night. She looked back. It soothed them. It quieted their anxiety. Even now, years later, it still did. Life returned to the valley. The story faded from news cycles, archived under unbelievable animal stories or viral miracles. But in Alder Valley, it remained sacred. Harold retired. He spent his days carving wooden bear sculptures, gifting them to children, tourists, or anyone who asked. The barn remained, half museum, half shrine. Visitors often came to sit in silence beside the crate. Some left letters. Others left dog toys or flowers. Leah stayed with Wildlife Services, now promoted to regional director. She made sure the woods around the barn were declared protected land. She never saw the bear again. Not in the trees. Not on the cameras. Not in her dreams. But every now and then, the breeze would carry something familiar, a scent of pine, wet earth, and something deeper. And she'd smile. "She's still watching," she'd whisper. Years later, when funding finally came through to digitally archive the barn story, a young intern named Cole stumbled upon the last frame from the barn's night camera. It had never been saved properly, buried in corrupted files. He restored it. And there it was. The bear, eyes closed, head resting gently against 4 sleeping puppies. Their tiny bodies curled into her fur like puzzle pieces. And on the edge of the frame, visible only if you zoomed in, a tear rolled from her eye. Not out of pain. Out of peace. 3 years had passed since the night the bear laid with the puppies for the last time. The pups were now full-grown dogs, strong, intelligent, deeply bonded. Thistle, the smallest, had grown into a graceful husky retriever mix with honey-brown eyes and a white patch on her chest that resembled a paw print. She lived with Leah now. Not because no one else wanted her, on the contrary, there had been many offers, but because when Leah visited the shelter, Thistle had walked over, sat at her feet, and refused to leave. "She chose you," the director had said. Just like the bear chose them. It happened in early August, the driest summer in decades. A lightning strike set the northern ridge ablaze. Flames leapt from treetop to treetop. Winds blew smoke across Alder Valley in thick, choking sheets. Leah was among the first responders. She coordinated wildlife rescue teams, helping relocate birds, deer, even a frightened lynx. Drones scanned the forest. Reports came in about a bear seen fleeing the flames near a dried creek bed. That night, Leah returned home exhausted. She dropped her gear, opened the door, and froze. Thistle stood in the hallway, tail stiff, eyes locked on the window. Then she made a sound Leah hadn't heard in years. A low, soft moan, not a growl, not a bark. A bear's call. That night, Thistle paced near the back door. She sniffed the air constantly, staring into the darkness as if something waited just beyond the trees. By morning, she was pawing at the door. Leah hesitated, then clipped the leash and opened it. Thistle bolted, not into danger, but into memory. Leah followed her, first on foot, then in her truck when the dog wouldn't stop. They drove past the old barn, past the creek, into the smoke-veiled edges of the forest. Thistle howled once, then turned sharply down a trail no dog had ever taken, one that led toward the old burial tree where the bear had once laid her lost cub. There, in a small clearing beyond the burn line, they found her. The bear. Older. Slower. Her fur streaked with gray. A long scar ran down her side. She was limping, favoring one leg, her breathing shallow. Her eyes were half closed. But they opened the moment Thistle entered the clearing. And in that second, despite years of distance, transformation and species, recognition sparked. Thistle did not bark. She approached carefully, slowly, her head low, tail wagging gently. The bear didn't move. Until Thistle placed her paw, the one with the white print, against the bear's forearm. And then the great creature exhaled. Leah stayed at a distance. She watched as the two lay side by side. As Thistle rested her head beneath the bear's chin, like she used to as a pup. No cameras. No crowds. Just reunion. Just breath. Just time. They remained like that until sunset. And when the air grew cold, the bear lifted her head, looked once more at Leah, and then gently slumped. Her chest stopped rising. But her eyes remained open. Fixed on Thistle. Fixed on home. They buried the bear beneath the leaning tree. The same tree where she had once buried her cub. This time, Leah placed something atop the mound, the old crate tag from the barn. Carved into it, one simple line. She gave more than life. She gave healing. Thistle sat by the grave until midnight. And when she left, she looked back once, not with sadness, but with gratitude. 3 months had passed since the bear's final breath in that quiet clearing. Autumn had blanketed Alder Valley in golden leaves and crimson branches. The forest, once scarred by fire, began its slow return, green shoots piercing ash, birds nesting where only silence had lived. But one part of the valley would never return to what it was. It had changed, because she had lived there. Because she had loved there. Leah stood at the center of a wide, open meadow near the barn, now cleared and repurposed. What once held tools now held memories. The Alder Valley Wildlife Sanctuary had begun construction, built entirely on donations sparked by the bear's viral story and peaceful ending. A new barn would become a rehabilitation space for orphaned wildlife. Cubs, kits, pups, fawns. A vet station was planned. A visitor path would loop quietly through the forest, allowing humans to observe, not disturb. At the center of it all stood a statue, bronze and breathtaking. A bear, eyes closed in peace, with 4 puppies curled at her side. A plaque below read, "She gave her heart to those not her own, and made them family." On the first opening day of the sanctuary, a crowd gathered quietly. No press. Just neighbors, rangers, and volunteers. Harold walked with a cane now, but his eyes were proud. He gave the first tour, stopping beside the statue and patting it once like an old friend. But it was Thistle, Birch, Maple, and Clover, now fully grown, who stole the moment. Each was led in on a leash, side by side, by the very people who had taken them in. When they reached the statue, they didn't bark. They simply circled it. And then, one by one, laid down at its feet, in the exact positions they used to sleep years ago. The crowd gasped. And cried. Weeks later, Leah wrote a letter for a national nature magazine. It was called, "The Bear Who Taught Us How to Mother." She wasn't ours. And they weren't hers. But in the moments that mattered, she gave what she had left, love. That's what made her more than wild. It made her timeless. The article went viral. Schools taught it in ethics classes. Wildlife centers requested copies. One group in Canada reached out to name a trail after the bear. Another in Japan translated it into a children's book. And still in Alder Valley, the forest remained unchanged, untouched by the noise of the world, quietly guarded by a legacy too pure to be forgotten. One evening, Leah took Thistle for a walk. They passed the barn, walked the new trail, and paused by the tree that held 2 stories beneath its roots, the bear's cub and the bear herself. The leaves rustled softly. The wind shifted. And just beyond the clearing, where fog kissed the treetops, Leah could have sworn she saw a shape watching. Not threatening. Not real. But present. "Thank you," she whispered. Thistle sat at her feet, eyes staring into the mist. And for the briefest moment, she wagged her tail. Sometimes family is born in blood. Sometimes, it's found in grief. But the strongest families are chosen in love.